Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams by Irene Spencer. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we continue with our reading. I'm so sad. I'm so sad because I have a feeling that this is going to be the end of the reading, but we'll see. Chapter 37. By the next summer, with my year-long encore as a plural wife drawing to a close, nothing eventful had happened. It was early August already. Nearly the whole town of Colonial LeBaron was attending the annual rodeo, which immediately followed the second session of our church conference. Not being a member of the church anymore, I'd chosen to withdraw from all religious activities, even the rodeo. So she went back just in being, not in actually being a part of the church, because she said she wasn't a member of the church anymore, but yet she's still around these people. And for whatever reason, the psychic told her that she needed to go back. Not one, but two psychics told her this. Okay, let's continue. While others attended the festivities, I spent my time preparing huge kettles of spaghetti, fresh corn on the cob, toasted green chiles, and homemade wheat bread. Word spread fast of the open invitation to come to my home for a free meal. More than 60 friends and family showed up to partake, because she seems to be the best cook, but we'll keep going. I wasn't on Verlin's calendar that day until supper time, but I know he'd join his friends anyway, so we could all enjoy his presence as we ate. He had just self-published a book titled The LeBaron Story. It was about the LeBaron family and Joel's claims to be the true prophet. I took great exception to a remark he published in his book asserting Irene's one wish was for a can of Franco-American spaghetti, while Charlotte would have been satisfied to attend just one evening of the summer festival at the University of Utah. It crushed me. He told the world, in essence, that I had no aspirations. Basically, right? Like, oh, she wants food. Meanwhile, this wife here would want to go and attend this meaningful event. Okay. At times in our poverty, yes, I'd mention how nice it would be to enjoy a can of spaghetti, but I wanted far more. And I talked more about the finer aspects of life than just about food. To prove my point, I told everyone who came in that day to read the spaghetti story on page 103. I served them a great meal as we all laughed about it. Seeing I was being a good sport about his book and that I'd been a good host to his friends, Verlin whispered to me as he left, I'll be late, about midnight, because I have a lot of business to take care of, but I'll be coming back to spend the night with you. That was nice, especially since it wasn't my night, but it didn't make up for much. In the year I've been back, circumstances hadn't changed at all. I just quietly accepted whatever life and Verlin dished out. Now, I was really merely making time until I found the right moment to tell Verlin that I'll be leaving for good within the next couple of weeks. I forced myself awake as Verlin crawled into bed beside me a few hours later. I didn't want him to zonk out in a flash as he usually did. It had been 6 weeks since I spent a night with him because he'd been busy traveling back and forth to Texas, publishing his book. On each trip, he took one of his wives, but my turn hadn't come up yet. He took me in his arms and held me, but he was completely silent. Despite my own plans to leave, I felt a sudden surge of that old familiar fear that Verlin would soon abandon me. It had always been the same story. Wait and wait for a few weeks on end, longing for his return, then start over. Not wanting to be pushy, but starve for his love, I let my fingers roam. He grabbed my hand. Please don't pressure me. I'm too tired to make love to you. She's touching him, and he feels like that's her way of pressuring him. I'd heard the same excuse the last 3 times. Didn't he realize it had been 4 months since he loved me physically? He always came to me late, and always he was exhausted. As usual, I was dying from neglect, but I was determined not to complain and cause a fight. I held my face close to him. His familiar scent made my tears well up as I recalled that old shirt of his I'd clung to and wept over all those years ago in the mountains. I wanted to catch and hold onto a part of him, even now, but I made myself turn over so he could go to sleep. As I did, he grabbed me, holding me as he began to convulse with soul-wrenching sobs. "What's the matter?" I asked, perplexed. "Tell me why you feel so bad." "I had a dream," he said between sobs. "All I can tell you is I had a dream." His need for me canceled out my every complaint. It wasn't like Verlin to show so much emotion. He always seemed strong and able to bear any trials that came his way. I knew that whatever was bothering him had to be serious. I ran my fingers through his hair, comforting him. "What did you dream?" I asked. His voice was hoarse with emotion as he said resolutely, "In a few days, you'll know what it was." I held him, but remained silent as he sobbed. I didn't insist he relate his dream to me. When he calmed down, Verlin apologized for not accompanying me earlier that day when I went to the cemetery to take a new headstone to Leah's grave. Then he wistfully added, "I hope you left the old cement marker I made on her grave. Was it still intact so many years?" "Yes," I reassured him. "I left it standing exactly where you placed it." We flattened the mound and then laid the new marker level on top of the grave. She would have been 27 years old today. "Unbelievable," he whispered. After a moment's silence, he continued, "I haven't slept for 5 nights. I'm so tired I feel sick, but I need to talk to you. I know you've had so many doubts about my love for you. I know you feel I've always taken you for granted, but it's because of you I've been able to organize my family and accomplish my utmost dream." Oh, here we go with the sweet talk. I'm going to sweet talk you and tell you how much you've done for me. Yet I didn't show you how much you've done for me over the years. But here I am sweet talking you to be like, "Oh, look how much you've done for me." Just to then what? Do what? What are we doing here, Verlin? We've done this plenty of times. What's going on? Let's see. "You've been my pillar of strength. Your heart hasn't been in it at all, but you've been steadfast anyway throughout the years. I can't help but love you for doing it. God has taken that into consideration, and I know you'll gain your reward." I decided it might be a good time to tell Verlin about what God showed me that afternoon almost a year before. "Have you ever had a revelation? Or can you say you know anything beyond a shadow of a doubt?" I asked him. "No," he admitted sadly. "You've never had a revelation." Wait a second. He's sitting here saying that he never had a revelation, you guys. Yet, isn't that why they did all those moves? Isn't that why he had to buy the trees? Isn't that part of the reason why they went to Nicaragua? Isn't that part of the reason why they went somewhere else because of these revelations? Interesting how now you didn't have a revelation. This surprised me some, since he always seemed sure of so much. But tonight, he was exposing his vulnerabilities. That was why I felt I needed to tell him this. Well, I have. I have a sure knowledge about God. Let's hear it, he said, sounding truly interested. "The night before I called you to come and get me, I had a spiritual experience that happened very suddenly. I can barely put into words what it was like. The Spirit of the Lord seemed to come upon me, and instantly the scales of confusion and disbelief fell from my eyes. Everything I perceived seemed more alive, maybe even alive for the first time. There was no time or space to beginning or end. All was an eternal now. It was as if I merged with the divine, removing all my fear, even the fear of death. In that moment, the doubt and the despair that had claimed so much of my energy over the past few years was replaced with a joy and a peace that surpassed all understanding. It was made known to me that I didn't have to try and do or be anything. I simply needed to be still. I know the experience came about because I surrendered. When I quit trying to control my life and mind, it was made known to me that God is the doer. It's our strong sense of self that brings about our delusions and pain. By surrendering, we tell God, "Not my will, Lord, but thy will be done." The essence revealed to me that everything was on time and okay, exactly as it was. Verlin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's beautiful, Irene. I hope you're right. But if your experience is true, it may just do away with Mormonism." He sighed heavily. "You know, I never thought Joel would die. He held the highest priesthood office on earth. He gave me the second highest. Without these two head priesthood offices, the church can't function." He paused in deep thought. "Irene, if something should happen to me, you can know that Joel was merely a good man, and we all just barked up the wrong tree." Is that him admitting that he doesn't believe in this thing anymore? You can know that Joel was a good man? In that case, please teach the kids simply to be honorable people and keep God's commandments. Before I realized it, the morning light was beginning to filter in. It was 5 a.m. and sleep hadn't been a consideration for either of us as we reminisced and shared some of our deepest feelings. Then Verlin said he needed to leave early to go to his office and get some writing done. His office was in Lily's house. He read my mind. "Irene, I'm not leaving you to go spend time with Lily, honest. I need to try and accomplish a few things. I can't sleep anyway. Will you forgive me if I leave so early?" "Of course. Go ahead," I said. I spent the next day with my kids, but I was preoccupied with thoughts of Verlin. Very soon, I'd need to tell him I was separating myself completely from him and from his religion. Although it would be hard to come by, I would need more than a few minutes with him in order to do it. What I had to tell him couldn't be settled quickly. I retired early and extra tired because of the sleep I missed the night before, but I was awakened by a violent dream. Y'all, the whole time I'm reading this and the way Verlin is acting, I keep feeling like something bad is going to happen to Verlin because his crazy brother is still out there trying to do stuff, right? And it's got me feeling anxious. Like, I feel real anxious right now. And like, she's so descriptive that I can't help but feel that way. Okay, enough of me. Back to the book. I woke up my 18-year-old daughter, Barbara, who was sleeping with me. "Someone is going to die." I said, "I wonder who it could be." I told her I seen a car wreck. 3 people were in the crash. 2 of them were covered with blankets and lying on the side of a freeway. Then a stranger appeared on the scene yelling at me, "Someone you love has been killed." In the dream, I cried out to God, "Please give me strength to bear this." Just as I was going to lift the blanket so I could see who it was, I woke up. Barbara reached out to comfort me. "It's only a dream, Mama, just a silly nightmare." "No," I answered stubbornly. "I know someone is going to die. I feel it." Would it be one of my sons? I tried to force those thoughts from my mind. If I dwelt on it, I warned myself it might come to pass. If any of you have ever had that feeling, it is an unexplainable feeling. And unfortunately, I've had it myself. And sometimes it's not even a dream. Sometimes it's just like a bad feeling, like something's going to happen. Like it's an eerie feeling to the point where when the phone rings, you know it's bad news. That is the worst feeling. And here she is having an actual dream. And we'll see if it comes to pass. Ugh. I barely saw Verlin for the next 2 days. He was about to leave town again. I was filled with anxiety, worn down emotionally from the year of disappointments and loneliness, and dreading what I had to tell my husband. I found him packing his suitcase and his sleeping bag into the trunk of John Adams' Volkswagen, parked between the church and Lily's house. I shook hands with John, a curly-haired convert I'd known for several years. He had driven from Utah to attend our annual church conference. Verlin shook the seat of the car as he spoke to John. Boy, this little car sure is flimsy. If we had a wreck, neither of us would survive. I hope we make it to Nicaragua and back safely, he said. They were going to check on some property Verlin maintained there in case he ever needed it for refuge. Don't worry, John answered. This little rabbit is great on the road. We'll make it to Mexico City just fine. We'll spend 2 days there and then go on to Nicaragua. Verlin excused the two of us, promising John he'd return shortly. He had some important things he had to do before they could leave. He guided me down the dirt road, hugging me. Wearily, he said, I hate to go. I really do. I have a feeling I won't be coming back. I stopped in my tracks. Damn it, Verlin, then don't go. No, he said, resuming our pace. When your time's up, there's nothing you can do about it. I didn't want to hear such nonsense. We walked down Lily's sidewalk towards his office. I knew if I didn't say my piece now, I wouldn't get another chance until he returned. I didn't want another wife showing up to interrupt me either. I thought about the psychics. They prophesied I'd be here a year, and then I would know the reason I had to return to Verlin. Another week, and my year would be up. Verlin planned to be gone for at least a month, so I must tell him now. He put the key into the lock of his office door. After a couple of twists, it opened, and he led me inside. I know you're in a hurry, I began, but I need to take this opportunity to talk to you. Hurry up, then. I'm rushed, and John is anxious to leave. Verlin, I think you're a great man, and I respect you, but I'm miserable living here in this situation, and I want a divorce. I want to move to the States before school starts. Please, he interrupted. We'll discuss this when I return. Then he added, maybe I'll solve all your problems by not coming back at all. Verlin, I pleaded. I'm living the biggest lie. I don't want this life another minute. I'm being stifled. Try to understand it's not you. I take full responsibility for my actions. I just want out. I cannot continue to live like this anymore. He opened his desk drawer. I knew he wasn't hearing a word I said. Now listen carefully, he demanded as he held up a stack of papers. This is my will. It'll be right here in the top right-hand drawer. Please see to it that there are no fights over it. I try my best to treat you all equally. Please, Verlin, this is ridiculous, I cut in. Pay attention, he continued. I have 2 insurance policies in here also. I know it won't be much, but it will help out a little. It will help out a little anyway. Verlin, please don't act like this. He stood up and took a picture he had painted off his office wall. This is for Andre. You'll notice I wrote a name on all these pictures, photos, and books. They are for whoever's name is written on them. He made me look in the desk drawer again. All the important papers are right here, okay? Oh, wow, y'all. I must have looked crazy as he took me in his arms. We silently held one another. Then his lips urgently found mine. Unable to fight back our tears, we both cried openly and brokenheartedly. Me, because I had to leave. Him, because he thought he was never coming back. Then he pulled away and took his hanky from his pocket to wipe his tears. Just say a prayer for me, he said softly. I didn't turn back to look at him for fear I would lose all self-control. I walked rapidly, yet resolutely away. I couldn't tell him the reason I had to give up loving him was simply for survival. He would never have been able to understand that it was only when I didn't care that I could bear it at all. No woman would ever again receive Verlin's tender affection within my view. I'd rather have nothing at all of him than share him any longer. She really loved him. So I was going away again, this time for good. It left me feeling numb, yes, but at least I was free. John kept the motor running as Verlin dashed into my house a couple of hours later on their way out of town. My daughter Margaret, who is a spitting image of me, was in the kitchen when he came in. Her father spoke out of breath. "Where's your mother?" "She just left a few minutes ago for San Diego to be with Kaylin's wife, Jean, while she has her baby." Verlin engulfed Margaret in his arms and wept. When he pulled away from her, he was clearly embarrassed. "I'm sorry I missed her," he said. Then he added gravely, "Please give her a message for me, will you? Tell her I love her. She never believed me, but I truly loved her." The following week, Jean and I prepared for the arrival of her first child. I was anxious for her labor pains to start. Her due date was 6 days away, but I impatiently longed to have the ordeal over with so I could get on with my own life. It was August 18th, 1981. A mild breeze blew in through the open screen of the trailer house door. The air felt so good on my face as I relaxed on the floor, enjoying the peace and quiet, trying to rest my overworked body and mind. A ringing telephone brought me out of my trance. Thinking me asleep, Kaylin snatched up the receiver and softly said, "Hello?" After a moment, he shouted into the phone, "Are you sure?" I bolted upright, begging God, as I had in my dream, please, Lord, let me be able to bear whatever it is." Tears were forming in Kaylin's eyes. "Is John dead too?" Then, covering the mouthpiece, he turned toward me. "It's Daddy," he added. "And John got killed in a car wreck near Mexico City." In shock and disbelief, I asked, "What is the date today?" "It's the 18th, Mom. He died 3 hours ago." It was far too surreal. My mind flashed back. Verlin saw it in a dream. Then I saw it in a dream. And even the psychic said, I know in 1 year why I had to go back to Mexico. Verlin died exactly 1 year after the day I returned. Oh my goodness. I believe her. This is crazy. They also said I would teach or show Verlin something no one else could. In the years since, I've pondered what that might have been. For one thing, I let him know I hadn't given up on him even though I was walking away from all the rest. I'd also been able to share with him my certainty of God's existence, goodness, and sovereignty. Who else in his life could have shown him all that? It's hard to recall the next few hours. Kaylin and I tried to comfort each other as we contacted all of Verlin's children's and close friends by phone. I relayed the message to Charlotte's mother, Aunt Rhea, in Salt Lake City, who in turn called reporters. The LeBarons were well known in Utah because of Ervil's threats and violence, so Verlin and John's deaths appeared on the 10 o'clock news. Word of their deaths came through Elizabeth, Verlin's ninth wife, who received a call from the Red Cross stating that Verlin and John had been in a terrible car accident near Puebla, Mexico. John died instantly. A Flight for Life helicopter arrived and transported Verlin to a hospital in Mexico City, where he died approximately 2 hours later. Their friend Howard Stubbs, who was also in the accident, was hospitalized briefly, but he recovered completely. She even saw that it was 3 people in the car in her dream. My goodness. 3 vehicles, packed with wives, children, in-laws, and friends, started on the 15-hour trip from San Diego to Colonial LeBaron. I drove all night while my children cried, tormented by the thought of losing their father. They all tried to catch what snatches of sleep they could so they could be rested for the funeral. Charlotte and Chad, Lucy's oldest son, flew to Mexico City and made arrangements to have Verlin's body flown to Chihuahua. Then it was to be driven to Colonial LeBaron. A strange quiet pervaded the large crowd of mourners we found waiting on the lawn of Charlotte's ranch-style brick home. The silence was eerie. People spoke in hushed tones as they awaited the arrival of the hearse. Most of them were Verlin's own wives, children, and other relations. 42 of Verlin's 56 children were able to attend. Priscilla and Lily were both pregnant, and in a few short months would give him a grand total of 58 children. At the time of his death, Verlin had only 6 wives left: Charlotte, Lucy, Lily, Elizabeth, Priscilla, and me. The other 4 wives, Helen, Suzanne, Beverly, and Esther, had withdrawn from his fold, divorcing him. Their divorces caused him to feel tremendous failure. The 6 of us wives milled around quietly, hoping the hearse would arrive soon. We all wanted to spend a few private moments with the man we loved. I walked into Charlotte's house to sit down and rest. Right then, Kaylin came to the screen door. "Mom, they're bringing Daddy now." 10 or 12 of Verlin's sons huddled around the door of the hearse. The driver motioned for people to stand back out of his way. Then they slid a large wooden crate out the rear door of the hearse onto the graveled road. All was silent except the screeching of nails as the boys pried them out with crowbars. They ripped the nails from the pine boards, tearing the wooden crate completely apart, revealing a masculine gray casket inside. The crowd moved aside to make room for 6 of Verlin's older sons: Verlin Jr., Mark, Stephen, Pierre, Kaylin, and Andre. They took the handles of the shiny casket, lifting it off the baseboard of the disassembled crate. Reverently, they carried their father's body onto Charlotte's living room and placed his casket on a sturdy coffee table. The moment of truth had arrived. As the lid was raised high, an explosion of sobs burst forth. Wives and children cried out in unison, the reality piercing our ears and hearts. Our husband and father had truly expired. After an hour or so, Verlin Jr. requested that only the immediate family remain in the room, allowing each one to offer his or her final respects. Hanging on to Linda while the others left, I stood back and watched as Verlin's 5 other remaining wives touched him, each trying, however, inadequately to express her innermost final thoughts and feelings. I wanted to cry out loud to tell Verlin how lucky he was to just be at peace. There would be no more quarreling, no more being fought over for a little bit of his time, no more jealous fits of anger, and no more turns. Lily patted Verlin's stocking-covered feet. Lucy kissed his large, cold hands. I sensed that all of our hearts were bursting with the same agonizing grief. Tears of sadness mingled with anger streamed down my face. In death, just as in life, we had no damn privacy. We were always intruding on each other, always having to postpone feeling our own personal feelings. I wanted to cry out to Verlin one last time, to reassure him of our friendship and thank him for my freedom. I needed to validate his worth as a wonderful human being, but also suggest to him we've both been victims caught up in the tangled web of a fanatical religion. I wanted to yell and get it all out. This dedicated man, just 51 years old, tried for so many years to pull me toward heaven, insisting I accompany him to celestial glory. Silently now, I confess to him that I didn't think I ever really wanted to be a goddess. All I truly wanted was to live a normal life, loving him and enjoying his undivided love. Most of all, I wanted to fulfill his needs and mine together as the only woman he'd ever desire. I reflected on my wedding night, recalling the aspirations and the dreams Verlin shared with me. It seems like such a far-fetched illusion then, his desires for at least 7 wives and 50 children, but he exceeded even his own wild expectations. Violent tears blurred my vision. Linda slipped her arm comfortingly around my waist. "Come on, kid, be strong. You'll be all right." As the lid of the coffin was about to be lowered, dozens of weeping, screaming children reached in to touch their father for the last time. I watched his wives quickly kiss his hands and his lips, trying to hold on to one more moment of him. Linda tugged at my arm. I stood before the casket in a trance. I didn't move, but I couldn't bring myself to touch him either. I wanted to treasure the good times, remember his kisses being warm. The lid closed with a thud, Immediately, frantic crying children forced it open about 6 inches for one final peek. His son Mark calling out in agonizing despair, "Daddy." My mind was exploding. I wanted to send everyone outside and raise the lid again to say all that was really in my heart. But how does a wife bare her soul with 5 other wives present? I peered at his face for one short moment as the casket closed for the final time. Then, feeling Verlin's presence and knowing he'd understand, I whispered, "Goodbye, lover." Woo-wee! I was not expecting that. Woo! I saw the date in the comments and I didn't look it up because I was like, okay, she said, remember that date. I'm going to remember that date. And little did I know what that date meant. Wow. Epilogue. Y'all heard me right. Epilogue. This is it. After all my struggles to finally choose freedom, it was tragedy that actually ended my 28-year marriage to Verlin LeBaron. The timing of these two events haunts me to this day. Was it just one of life's synchronicities? Was his death preordained or merely an accident? Did I leave him, somehow knowing subconsciously we reached the end of our marriage anyway? During my first 21 years as Verlin's polygamous wife, I became the mother of 14 of his children. I shared my husband with 9 other women and a total of 58 kids. We lived in utter poverty, laboring to raise our own food, make our own clothes, and build our own houses. Most of that time, we lived without electricity or indoor plumbing. 6 of my children at some point in their lives became entangled in a polygamous lifestyle. But today, all but 3 of them are living monogamy. Wow. Wow. I still keep in contact with some of Verlin's other wives. We remain friends and stay with each other during funerals and weddings. I currently have 118 grandchildren. The oldest only 26. I have 118 grandchildren. I have 37 great-grandchildren with more on the way. Yes, I do know all their names. 6 of them are named Irene after me. I guess I must have done something right after all. When people ask me about my family tree, I tell them I have a family forest. I'm grateful I've been able to treasure the many good memories I have of the years described in this book. It wasn't all bad, though. It was all tainted by a terrible delusion. After sacrificing so much to try and attain celestial glory, I think my greatest accomplishment is the bond of love and friendship I share with all my children and grandchildren. In this way, Verlin was right. I truly am a blessed woman. Still a close family, we visit each other as often as we can. Now, at last, I have a husband who's devoted to me alone. Hector J. Spencer married me 19 years ago, making me his only wife. I treasure his love. It may seem simple to him, but he fulfilled my lifelong dream of being the favorite. I value the drive and honesty I found within myself as I struggled through trials and suffering in my life. I learned to trust myself, to appreciate and believe in my lifestyle and the choices I make as I live each day. Somewhere along the way, I learned to follow my own path rather than blindly obeying what others wanted or demanded of me. 20 years ago, I became a born-again Christian, as did many of my children. It took me very much by surprise, most especially because it cost me nothing. At my son Kalen's insistence, I moved to Anchorage, Anchorage. I know I'm saying it right. Anchorage, Alaska, taking my Book of Mormon with me to show him how he'd been misled when he converted to Christianity a few years before. There was no sacrifice in being a Christian. It seemed too easy to just confess Christ as your Savior and think you were saved. I knew we needed to work for our salvation. I couldn't believe Kalen turned against Mormonism so easily. As I've said, the roots of effective brainwashing can extend quite deep, and my deep roots had never been fully extracted despite all my experiences. That explains Mary to me, and Janelle, but more so Mary. Once I arrived in Alaska, Kalen invited me to Abbott Loop Christian Center. I accompanied him mostly to check out what the devil he gotten himself into. As I entered the large sanctuary, taking my seat in a pew next to him and his wife Jean, I felt guilty. After all my years of devotion to the one and only restored true gospel on the earth, what was I doing in a Gentile church? But it was while I sat there in that open and free spiritual space that I experienced a miraculous conversion. For how long had I thirsted after God, begged him to speak to me personally, and then done what others told me he wanted for and from me. Now I finally heard him speaking directly to my own heart. He called me by name. Irene, where have you been that you never worshiped me? Then the Holy Spirit simply revealed to me God's unconditional divine love, fully available right now through the sacrifice already paid by his son. I wept, ashamed to think of all the years I struggled to become a goddess and one day join my husband as the ruler of our own world. I was overcome by God's mercy and love that had been there all along, just waiting for me to receive them. After years of religious sacrifice and suffering, I finally understood that Christ really is sufficient. Never again would I have to jump through strange, agonizing hoops in order to cajole God into accepting me. In fact, the God I've been taught all my life to worship and obey didn't really exist at all. That God was not very powerful, not very good, and he required us to completely reject some of the most beautiful things the true God had for us. The deep human desire to unite exclusively with one person of the opposite sex is not evil and is not to be shunned. God set it up that way before the fall, and he never changed it. He certainly never declared it a sin. My belief in what the Mormon fundamentalists taught about God and salvation had been so sincere. I embraced their miserable prescription for life in marriage. One can be sincere and at the same time be sincerely wrong. Mormonism adopted polygamy from an ancient social custom from biblical times and made it into an essential principle for exaltation in heaven. Along the way, polygamy became a means of controlling believers and turning them into submissive pawns. Through it, prophets controlled believers and men controlled women, all allegedly in accordance with God's will. No one seemed to acknowledge how terrible it was for everyone to live it, women, children, and men as well. I certainly couldn't look at Verlin's life and say that his many marriages brought him more joy than hardship. The hardship itself is taken as a reason to carry on. It's held as a martyr's badge of honor. Mostly, though, it's just denied. The only reason polygamy works at all is because the people who practice it so fiercely believe they are living God's will. I decided it was finally time for someone to tell it like it is. All the books I read on Mormon polygamy were vivid accounts of sacrificing women who upheld and empathetically stated they loved the principle, and emphatically stated they loved the principle. I was convinced that these committed women simply did as I've been taught to do, doggedly affirmed the truth and righteousness of plural marriage and stubbornly maintained its advantages over monogamy. Forbidden to acknowledge their true feelings, they smother their own agony and wrenching pain just as I did, so as being instructed to do. This reminds me of Christine, because I think a lot of what Christine gave us was what she was taught. They are taught this is what they're supposed to say and do, so that's what they do. I've personally known hundreds of plural wives. Their smiles are a facade required of them by their husbands and spiritual leaders. It's up to the women to make plural marriage appear to be the superior mode of marriage. It's demanded that the wives present themselves as united with one another, with their husbands, and with their religious communities. The success of plural marriage depends entirely on their willingness to play the sacrificial role and play it well. At one time or another, when their tender hearts were bursting, many of these women broke the rules by revealing to me the strain and sorrow they've experienced every day. I've seen polygamous wives stamp their feet in defense of their lifestyle, even while the truth is engraved on their faces. I've seen wives who have no light left in their eyes, who've had relinquished all of their rights and dreams. I've seen many manic depressive wives who succumb to the complete emotional nervous breakdowns, and many neglected ones who succumb to the tantalizing lure of adultery. Almost all the faithful polygamous women I've known have been resigned to lives of bare existence, their joys, hopes, and dreams forfeited until the next life. Like them, I vehemently defended polygamy for decades. It was my only sense of identity. I sacrificed everything else for it, so I desperately needed it to be true. I remember parroting the inane arguments of the early Mormon prophets who claimed that polygamy would do away with all of society's ills. There would be no adultery because if all women fell in love with a married man, she could honorably have him. There would be no prostitution because if one wife didn't understand or welcome her husband sexually, he had several other wives there to satisfy his needs. After all, no one woman could fully satisfy a man anyway. I heard it said many times that a man may love one woman sexually, another for her intelligence, and yet another for her cooking. That was me. Though every man vowed he loved his wives equally, the obvious truth was very different. Every man I knew had a legal wife who was usually the dominant wife, and a favorite wife whom all the other wives resented most. And many polygamous men, no matter how earnest they are about obeying God's laws, at some point use plural marriage to justify adultery. Perhaps they consider it their due for all the rest they go through. A product of 4 generations of polygamy, I've been trapped in that closed society believing we were God's chosen people. I've been taught to dread intermingling with the wicked Gentiles outside of our sect. God commanded that we become a peculiar people, keeping ourselves separated from the vile customs of society. But my distrust diminished with each outsider I met. Their warm acceptance, which I thought I'd have to beg for, was given freely. People outside esteem me as an individual, not because of my religious beliefs. Writing my story has brought me healing, but this book doesn't tell it all. It doesn't describe the terror to which my infamous brother-in-law, Orville LeBaron, subjected us for several years. He ordered the deaths of at least 28 of our family, friends, and church members. I was one of the people on his death list, which helped inspire me to go along with many of our moves throughout Mexico and Central America. While I wrote this book, Orville cunningly seemed to be taking it over, as he was prone to do with everything. So I ripped out page after page about him, realizing that this has to be my story, the story of my shattered dreams as a polygamous wife, and my journey into the light of God's unconditional love. And that is the end. Oh, Irene! Let me tell you something. Irene did her thing on this book. She has a timeline of the kids. What I didn't know is that, okay, we know that Charlotte and Irene have the same father. Lucy is the second cousin of Charlotte and Irene. It has all the different wives listed here, 1 through 10, and the children. So the most kids, according to this page, you see this? Because I'm not going to read all their names. Okay, you can kind of see it. There's backwards. But this is Irene. Do y'all see? She had the most children for him. She had the most children for that man. And she has 2 up here that have passed. Leah and Sandra. Charlotte has 1 that passed named Mark. Lucy had 3. Oh, is Lucy? Lucy had 3 that passed. Beverly had 2 that passed. Esther had 1. Helen and Elizabeth were widowed, so their kids don't get counted in that number. That's crazy. That's so crazy when you think about it, right? That's it. Y'all, You know what we do. 1 to 5, what's your rating? I'm going to be honest. Normally I get irritated with the way these books end. She has another part. And even without that other part, I liked how she ended this. I do. Irene, out of all the books, y'all, that we've read up here, I'm going to say this is my favorite. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised that this became my favorite because I wasn't sure. But Irene, for me, gets 5. 5. Scale is 1 to 5. 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. What do you guys rate this book? Yeah, this is a good one. I will be picking up the next book. I think it's Restored Dreams or something like that. Or Shattered Dreams Restored, something along those lines. Unfortunately, I will be reading it off of an electronic device. Y'all may not know this about me, but I hate I hate electronic books. It's something about holding a book in my hand and physically being able to turn the pages and stuff that I love. But we're going to do what we're going to do. And several of you all have said that you want to hear the next book. I don't know if I'm going to read the one about Ervil. Maybe I will because she wrote it and her books seem to be good. But that's the end of this one. Y'all, let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this book journey. To think that the whole reason why I started reading books up here in the first place was because of Tulips and Cats, because she recommended me to read the Sister Wives book way back when, and who knew that it would turn into this. We're up here and we're, engaging and talking about the books as I read them. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all really enjoyed this book. Let me know, out of the books that you've read, some of you have been here for all of them, some of you may not have been, but what do you think about this book? This is definitely my fave out of all of them. If you have not done so already, like the video because it still helps. There are people that are coming to the channel based off of books I read months ago. So every little like, every little comment, it helps. Thank you so much. As I said again, I really, really appreciate you guys. And until the next one.